Good morning. Welcome to Studio Time with Deb. This is the online version. Today we're going to be talking about files, and I'm going to have a little video for you on finish filing. This class is about files and finishing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a basic overview of files. So last week, and I think a little bit the week before, I talked about files and filing, and I had a lot of questions from you guys. I was really surprised how many questions I had. So I wanted to just give you some basic general information about files. And there's lots and lots of kinds of files out there. I mean, you can get files from Home Depot, you can get files from Harbor Freight, you can get files from Contenti, you can get files from Rio Grande. You don't need a lot of files, but what you do need are the right ones to do the job for you. And you need good files. Files are one place that I put money. If you take care of them, they'll last you pretty much the rest of your career, especially for the soft metals that we use them on. If you're using them on steel, they'll probably wear out over time and you'll need to replace them. They are just little cut teeth in there. So they will wear out. But if you take care of them, for the most part, for what we do, they'll last a long time. Many of you have gotten the files that I've recommended in the past. I still recommend those. Those are my very, very favorite. File basics. I want to tell you, you should always work with the largest file that you can comfortably use for the job. And the reason is that it's easier to maintain control if you have a larger file. And the reason for that is you can kind of see what's going on with it. When you're filing with a needle file, it's really easy to be shaky with that because it's tiny, right? It's even hard to see where it's parallel to the ground or where it's even on the piece. But if you're working with a really large file, you can tell when it's parallel to the ground. And the other thing is that you get a lot more work done with each stroke that you do. So having a lot more work done, getting a lot more work done makes everything, it's just much more efficient. So last week I did talk about these a little bit. I talked about the texturing that I did and the hammering that I did. And what I didn't like was this part that's up here, the tubes that made it all sit in a row. And the reason I didn't like them is because when I hang them on a chain, they look like this and everything spreads out and looks weird. And I didn't like that at all. So I left them on my bench and I thought about it. And then at 4:30 in the morning one morning, I grabbed the notebook that I keep beside my bed. And I thought of these notes, and this is exactly the notes I took at 4:30 in the morning. There was a little bit of light in the room, so I didn't write on top of other writing that I had done, which is better than I usually do. But I did write notes, and they're a little incoherent. So one of the things I wanted to point out to you is that the notes that I write when I do something like this, the next morning, immediately I go in and I translate them into something that I can actually understand later. So I took those notes and then I put them here and looked at them to figure out what to do. So one of the things I was thinking is to cut these things, well, a couple of things. One is to put these on a tube so that they stay straight and then end cap the tube and then have the necklace coming from that so that everything stays the way I want it to stay. The other thing I thought of is to cut the tubes way, way down and to put washers in between of various sizes and decorations. So then if it hangs jiggledy-jaggledy, I don't really care because that's what it's going to look like anyway. So the first thing I did was to go in and find washers. Now, you know, I only have 3 pieces here instead of the 4th one, and that's because I couldn't find the 4th one because it was on my desk, but I couldn't find it. But I did later. So anyway, there's 3 of them here. So the first thing I did was to come in and find all these little washers and jump rings and stuff that I had that I could possibly use on there. And then I cut the tubes down. And when I cut the tubes down and hung them on the chain, I liked it just fine. I said, I don't need the washers. But what I did is there were 2 parts. This is the 4th one that I couldn't find earlier. And this one did not have any markings on it. And what I did was to go in with a file. This one, I went in with just a square file and I filed notches going across. And this one, I went in with a checkering file and filed different directions. So I wanted you to see that when I get to the files. So this is how files are measured. The hand files, big files, are measured from tip to heel, and the heel is right here, this part. Needle files are measured from tip to tail. So this is a 7 7/8, I believe they call it, inch needle file, which is larger than a standard needle file, but it's the one I like to do most of my work. I seldom use the smaller ones. I usually use these larger ones. And this is considered an 8-inch file. So Swiss cut, normally in jewelry, we use what are called Swiss cut files. Swiss cut is standard in the jewelry industry. And you can also find German cut files. They are coarser for the same number. So if you get a number 2 Swiss and a number 2 German, the number 2 German one is going to be coarser than the number 2 Swiss. The US system is different entirely. They don't use numbers. They use smooth, bastard cut, coarse. They have, and it's kind of all over the map. And I have to say that even within the Swiss, there's more difference from company to company than I think is reasonable, but it is what it is. So sometimes when I find a good file that I really like, I'll buy several of them, or I'll especially let my students know about them. Grobet is a company, I really like their files, and some years back they became Grobet USA. I think they split, but I'm not positive exactly what happened. But it's a Swiss company, and the old Grobet files were made in Switzerland. They all say Swiss. But now the files, both the ones from Europe and the ones from the US, are all made in Italy. So I'm not sure what happened, and I'm not sure if they're all the same or if the USA ones are different in some way, but I find the Grobet USA ones to be plenty good for what I do, and they hold up really well, and I can't really tell the difference. So at least for my purposes, the Grobet USA ones, and they're a little bit cheaper than the European ones. So they're good. You need to take care of your files. This is a brass strip that I use to clean a file. And I've got this file. I will show you this and I'll show you how to clean it. But basically what we do is that we take this little brass strip right here, and you're going to go with the teeth this direction. And what happens is the teeth will cut into the end of this, and then you're able to push all of those little bits of metal out. That is much gentler on your file than using a file card. File cards are steel, and especially if you just take and scrub your file, that's really hard on it. These are little itty bitty teeth.
Deb,
yeah.
I was taking notes when you said which direction to go with the brass.
You go with the teeth, so you go right across here. I'm going to dim this also, Ashley.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. This is something I want you to see. An obvious one: don't get your files wet. If you get your files wet, they're going to rust. The files that we work with are so fine and precision for the most part that if they rust a lot, if they rust even a medium amount, they're junk. You can just throw them in the scrap pile. They're not really salvageable. If you have a really coarse file, sometimes you can acid etch them and do some things to get the file back, but for the really fine ones, not so much. I recommend that you store your files in a pouch of some sort. This pouch is one that I got from these came from Idlewild one year, and this one is a paintbrush holder, and you can get those from Michael's or wherever. And the paintbrushes that come in them are really crappy. So they're not even decent flux brushes. They're really bad. So you can just throw the brushes away and or give them, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, you can, and then save these pouches, and they are great for storing the files.
You can buy the pouches without the brushes on Amazon.
Yeah, they're actually more expensive, at least from what I found. I didn't find any that were the cheapest ones I found. If you do the 20% off at the Michael's and get the coupon, it was cheaper to buy the paintbrushes and throw them away. What kind of society do we live in? These are what I do with dead files. So dead files, if you save dead files, They actually make really good tools. They are tool steel, and they're high quality tool steel. So these are ones, I was talking to somebody earlier today. I do not love working in steel, Margie. I don't like working in steel. And I don't like hot working steel. So one of the things that I do when I have something like this is that I cold work it. So if you look at the end of this, all I did on this was to make it so my the end of the file just arches a little bit. I just took a grinder, I rounded it, I sharpened it, and this one was a triangular file, and you can see I just ground it off, but it's more rounded. This one was a flat file, so I could only round it a little bit. Here's another view of the same ones, and they're great stamps. These are called scorpers. They're tools for scoring sheet metal, so that the scoring and bending, like I told you with the wire, you know, where I use a file and I file down through. This is if I want to score a whole sheet, a long piece. I can put a ruler up next to it and draw this through, and what it does is that it pulls the metal here out of the way, kind of like a backwards graver. This is a triangular file. This is the very end of it. And what I did was to take it and polish it. And by polishing it up like that, I'm able then to put it in a vise or do something, and then I can rest whatever I need to on it, to do stamping, to set a rivet, to set a tube stone, something where it's hard for me to get up inside something. There's no reason I can't take a used file, polish the end of it up, and then it's like a tiny stake, right? The other thing I want you to notice on this, and I've got another picture of it, is right here. I needed a tiny, tiny little area that was rounded out like that, that I could rest something in when I was working. There you can see it a little bit better. There you can see it. And so I was able to carve that out of the file, and then I could rest my piece in there and do whatever I needed to with that. So dead files are still useful. This is a tool that Sherry had and showed me, and this is a tiny, tiny micro triangular file. And this is a tool made from one of these that pries bezels open without harming things much. It's a very gentle bezel prying tool. So you have to be really careful with something like this because files are very brittle. They're very hard. And really prying on the end of one is a great way to break them. So you need to be careful about that. Don't pry on the end of your tools. The other thing is, don't use needle files as solder picks. Honestly, guys, in class, I always find needle files stuck in the solder pick drawer, and that just destroys them. You get them hot like that, and they're no good anymore. These are the files that I recommend. There's some Riffler files on here. I wish all of them were number 4 cut. Some of them are only number 2 cut. I will put this on the Facebook page so that you can see it. I also have the checkering files listed, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about checkering files. And those come from Grobet. And then from Rio, these are the pliers that I use to hold things when I'm filing a lot. And then Michael's, there's the paintbrush holders. And then there's another file tool roll bag that I found that was kind of affordable. These are checkering files. Checkering files come in different lengths, different widths, and different thicknesses, and different cuts. The top one is a 00, the second one down is a 0, the third one down is 1, and the bottom one is a 2. And I took pieces of silver and I went in one direction, I crossed them, and then if you look at this end on each one, you can see where I cut the end of them some. I have a better shot of just the ends. There you can see it a little bit better. These are great. They're decorative things. It's a little, so Elise has a ring that I made that is silver, and it just has the cuts on it in one direction. It's like this one right here. And because silver is so soft and she wears the ring all the time, She wears through them in about a year, year and a half. She can completely wear that texturing off. And so I make another one and she does it again. In gold, it'll hold up longer, but any of you who have wedding bands that's Florentine, you know over time they wear off, right? They wear down. So the Florentining is something that will wear down over time, but for a lot of pieces, if you're doing earrings or if you're doing something like that, it'll stay put. It'll stay put for a long time. It's also really nice for edge textures. There's the edges. So this is a real close-up, but you can see this is the 000, number 1 and number 2 cuts. And you can see here where I went in one direction and here I went crossways with it. And this is the video. So we are going to try this. All right, everybody hold your breath. This is a short video about finish filing and cleaning up a setting, and it could be any small item. I recommend that you clean and finish a part prior to soldering anything together. It's only more difficult afterwards. When I was polishing this edge, see how rumpled it looks? It's not smooth. See, and you can see that by seeing the reflections in the metal. So I used white diamond very lightly to be able to see better what it really looked like. It's just not smooth enough. So what I'm going to do is, sandpaper will damage my stone. Files, other than diamond files, won't, but unless it's a really soft stone. So I'm going to get a really fine number 4 or number 6 file, and I'm going to use the largest file that's reasonable for me to use, that's easy for me to control. I can get more work done with each stroke if I use a larger file. And so this is one I really like. This is from Stuller. It's an 8-inch needle file. So it's bigger than most needle files and smaller than a lot of the plain files. The piece needs to be secure. If you can hold it in your fingers, that's great. If you need a ring clamp or a bench pin or one of the wooden Rio clamps, that's great too. What I'm doing is draw filing. I'm going tip to tail on the file and left to right so that I'm doing the whole piece at once, covering almost the whole piece. And it's very, very light, very gentle. What I'm doing is watching for the reflection of light in the piece. I want a smooth reflection. I'm looking for spaces, not the area that I filed, but any spaces that I didn't file. And I want to take off only a very minimal amount. Tiny imperfections can be sanded out, so I don't want to go all the way down to the surface. So I worked the back side, I'm working the front side. I'm looking at the reflection the whole time. I'm looking at what's going on with this. So on a file, I do want to go tip to tail like this. If I only go sideways, if I just go a little bit side like that, then I'm only using a tiny, tiny portion of the file, and I don't want to do that. It doesn't get much work done. It's not as efficient. All right, so looking at this, it's much flatter. So now what I need to do is to get out the scratches that I made with the number 4 cut file. I do need to protect my stone. Remember that I said sandpaper will damage a stone, even hard stones. So I want to sand in the opposite direction of the file marks. And it'll show me, that way I can see when I'm done. If I file in the same direction, or sand in the same direction that I filed, I won't be able to see what's going on. So I want to sand in the opposite direction. And then when I'm looking at this, what I'm looking for is all those file marks to be gone. Okay, and I want, again, it's the reflection I'm looking at. There's a little pock mark right there at the edge. And you have to make a judgment about whether to go back to the file or whether to try it with the sandpaper. Sandpaper will take a little bit longer, but I have, it is a little slower. I'll remove less material. So then when I think I've got it all out, all the file marks, the next thing that I want to do is go to the white diamond, and I want to go across the other direction again. So I'm not with the sanding marks. I want to go across that. I'm using a felt buff, and watch how I keep it moving. I don't want to hold it in one place because if I do, what's going to happen is I'll dig a gouge. So look at the difference. It's really flat, really even reflections. That's what I'm looking for. No wrinkles, no rumples. So then I'm going to go to the next side. And on the next side, it's a little bit tarnished. So the first thing I'm going to do, I could use steel wool or I could use white diamond. But it's kind of a lie detector to tell me what's going on. I need to polish it up enough to see what's going on. Otherwise, it looks great when it's tarnished, but it's not. It's not. You need to recharge your buff occasionally. When the wheel is silver colored, then it has metal on it. See, like that? It doesn't have enough compound on it. So what you need to do is just touch it to the compound, and it's just a touch, just lightly. You need to recharge your buff often, but just small amounts. And that's how you'll get the most done. It is the compound that actually does the cutting. It's not the buff itself. This side also has rumples, the next side, and it needs some attention. And right in here, there's a small gouge that I need to get out. So on this, when I start filing, I'm going to file just a little bit. And then I'm going to show you that there's some areas that are below the file marks. You see that there's some areas that haven't been filed yet. They look a little bit darker. See them? So I need to file a little bit more to get down to those areas. So I'm going to file a little bit more, and then I'm going to repeat with the white diamond, the sanding, and then the white diamond. A little bit on the sanding. Notice how I gravitate to that little itty bitty V groove on my bench pen. That is just a tiny place that kind of locks things in so that pieces don't slip as much. I can hold them there really easily. So this side has some pock marks going on it that are, these pieces have been knocked around in a toolbox for a long time, and sometimes, you know, things happen to them. So I need to look at it and assess whether the pock marks are deep enough for me that I shouldn't deal with them, or whether they're shallow enough that I can go back in and deal with it. So I'm going to use the white diamond again to be sure that I'm where I want to be. So now I'm going to come in with the white diamond and clean up this side and make sure that everything looks good. This is the third side. It has some pock marks. Can you see those little pock marks in there? It's got some problems. So especially if it's not a new piece, if it's one that's been bumping around somewhere, it may have some marks that are too deep to get out. And that's especially true if it's a thin bezel, because you really don't want to go through a bezel. That's a disaster. Then you've got a real problem. So I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to file a little bit. I'm going to assess it. When I think I'm 95+% of the way done, then what I'm going to do is to sand it, going across the other direction. But see the pock marks? I've got some right there. They're very little, but it's worth noting and it's worth paying attention to. I don't want to file just on the pock mark. What I have to do is to lower all of the metal around it. So I have to lower it on either side. So I have to make a judgment about whether that's worth it or not, whether it's good to go back in there or whether I should just leave it. I'm going to sand, again, against the scratches that I made with the file. And I'm just using one of those sanding sticks from the beauty supply. I like those a lot. They're a little bit soft. You need to be a little bit careful that they're not going to round your corners. And then again, the felt wheel with the white diamond. And that's to get the final scratches out. It'll get the sanding scratches out. And it also lets me know what the piece really looks like. It's not going to let me get away with anything. And what I don't want to do is to create a trough. So I don't want to polish right on a pock mark or something. I want to be sure that that I'm polishing the entire side and I'm keeping it really nice and even. See, I'm keeping the wheel moving, not leaving it in one spot at all. Because if I leave it in just one spot, then I'm going to dig a trough. And white diamond will dig a trough. It is abrasive. So it needed a little touch more. So I go back in with the sandpaper and then I'm going to reassess. And that's what it takes. It takes going back and forth. You look at it, you assess, you look at the reflection, assess the piece, what it's looking like. Back in with the white diamond. And then I'm going to look at the last side, the top. Now the top is an issue, partly because it's got that stem on it, and then partly because my buff is a little bit rounded, so I can't get in there very tight. So what I'm going to do, I'll polish what I can with the white diamond wheel on both sides, but then I'm going to pull that off. And I'm going to change wheels. And what I'm going to do is to get the blue Advantage wheel. That's the little, and the knife edge one. The little one from Rio. And they are flexible. So what I can do then is to get really close to the stem if I work on that back side. So I'm not working on the knife edge. I'm working on the back side of the knife edge, so that it flexes down a little bit and gets right up there to the stem. And I'm going to flip it around, do the front. I'm going to flip it around again. I'm going to do the side. And see how I keep it moving? Because if I leave that one still, it will definitely dig a trough. And I do not want to do that. No troughs. So the last thing I'm going to do is the blue wheel won't damage most hard stones unless you leave it there for a really long time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the very top edge of the bezel. Now, if that top edge is rough at all, what I can do is to use a Barrett file or a graver and clean it up and make it nice and pretty, and then go back in to polish it with the blue wheel. Usually they're in pretty good shape. If I cleaned it up well before I set the stone, then they're in pretty good shape. So the next thing I'm going to do is to clean up the back of this. The back has some texture, but not a lot of texture. And I want to be sure, especially that the areas that don't have texture are cleaned up and scratch free, so that so it looks intentional. I don't want it to look like I just abandoned the project. Now you can see that I just took my stone and laid it down on the bench pin. You need to be a little bit careful about that. If that's a soft stone, that can really cause a problem. Being a hard stone, I know that I'm okay with that. But if it's a soft stone, you may want to put down some tough break or a rag or something like that so that you won't hurt your stone. White diamond's a lie detector, and it'll let you know what's going on. I don't like the shiny surface, though. So once I'm done, what I'm going to do is to take steel wool, and I'm going to steel wool it. And that just gives me, the steel wool is a burnisher, but it also gives me a slight brushed finish that I think is a really rich finish. And if it has any sharp edges, so like on the stem of this piece, I used a checkering file, and it's a little bit sharp, but after steel wool, it's not sharp at all. So white diamond is a grease-based compound, and what I'm going to have to do is take it to the sink and wash it with warm water and soap. I like Dawn dish detergent to do that with. So what I'm doing is just cleaning it up with steel wool. And I'm using the steel wool kind of like the same way that I use the white diamond, kind of as a lie detector. The steel wool isn't as good for that because it has scratches in it, so I can get away with a little bit more. But if I think it's in pretty good shape, I'll just do that and set it aside and it'll be fine. But if there's anything deep, the steel wool will definitely have it show.
I use either 2/0 or 4/0 steel wool, usually 2/0, so it's a little bit on the coarse side. And it gives me a really nice satin finish, which I think is really beautiful, and it's real repeatable when you're working on pieces. So if you have some that you keep around that anytime you need to polish your jewelry, I just take out some steel wool and scrub it a little bit. I know a lot of you don't like steel wool, but just be nice with it. This one has a little rumple right there, so I'm going to repeat my process. I'm going to take my file. I'm going to secure my piece. And then I'm going to file until that little rumple is gone. Or almost gone. 98% gone. And then what I'm going to do is I'll come in and sand. And from a number 4 file to a sand it's not a lot of work. I would rather file any day than sand. I just don't like sanding. But I'll file. Maybe that's why I like the sanding boards, because they're like files. And that looks much, much better. So now I'm going to go back in with the white diamond one more time. And I use the felt wheel because it is hard, and so it'll give me a really nice true surface. I could use a muslin buff on this. Muslin buffs tend to round the surfaces a little bit. They tend to smooth things, textures and stuff. They'll tend to smooth them out a little bit more. So now I'm going to steel wool it. And then it's much better. Now we're good to go.
So what'd you think?
That was excellent.
Thank you. That was my first venture into trying to record that. So, and I thought it was really important because I tell you guys to do that all the time, but I can't show you the way I could usually with this one, because it's just hard for you to see what I see when I'm doing it. But with the camera right there, I think it was easier than just me talking about it.
Good job filming, Deb. That was great.
Thank you. I've got a couple things I'm going to show you. I'm going to switch to the webcam.
Do we have a minute for questions?
Yes, we have yes, if there's questions, by all means.
I'll start with one, which is when you're using that little knife wheel, the Blue Advantage wheel, is it like slow, medium speed, full speed? Or you like pedal to the metal on that one?
I am almost never pedal to the metal on the flex shaft, but I do use it at, I would say, a moderately high speed, typically. I would rather have a higher speed and a lighter touch, so that so the wheel is doing a lot of the work just because it's spinning, and then I don't have to push very hard. Because I think when you get into trouble on the flex shaft is when you push really hard on it. Like if this is the piece and you're pushing down on it, I think that's when you get into trouble and you get caught. So if you do a really light touch and a higher speed, I think in general, that's not universally true, but overall, that's a good approach. Other questions?
It looked like you were filing in both directions without lifting up.
Yeah, so that was called the draw filing. I addressed it lightly in the video, but so if I'm doing like shaping filing, and when I teach students to file, I teach you put the file down, push, stop, pick it up. And the reason is that we have a lot of control when we're doing that. You can assess what's going on with each stroke, everything else. When I'm looking at this, what I'm doing is I want to cover the entire surface. So if this is the edge of my bezel from here to here, I want to start here with the tip and I want to end over here with the end of my file. So I don't really need to, I don't need to pick it up to know where I am, right? What I need to do is to study that surface and to make sure that that surface is doing what I want. And it's such a fine file that I can do that, and I can draw file that like that, and I know where I know where I am to make that surface really, really nice and flat. Okay, Marla, you have a question?
I do.
Yeah.
Quick question. What kind of wheel were you using with a white diamond? I didn't catch that.
It's a felt wheel, and it's the Rio calls it soft, but it's not a super soft one. But don't get their hard ones. Their hard ones are like a piece of wood, and they are just nasty to use. I haven't found anything they're good for at all. The ones that Rio calls soft, I think, are medium, and those hold up pretty well. I also use larger felt buffs than a lot of folks use. The larger the wheel, the faster that outside is spinning and the more work you get done with it. However, unless you're really comfortable on the flex shaft, it can also get away from you really fast. The smaller wheels are a little bit easier to control.
Yeah, or go back very much earlier. What do you mean by an acid bath to clean up your coarse rusted files?
Oh man, it's called oxalic acid, I believe, is what a lot of people use. And you can just kind of soak it in that. And what it does basically is that it etches your file. It re-etches it. And so if you have a really coarse file, you can do that. My really coarse files are cheap. They're the ones I get from Harbor Freight or something that I don't mind using on steel and that I don't mind, beating up, and so I'm not going to buy $20 worth of oxalic acid to etch them for anything. I'm going to put them in the junk drawer and buy a new file. And for our fine files, it won't do it, because by the time you etch down, you've etched the teeth and they don't work well anymore. So don't get your files wet. That's the best answer. Do you have a lot of files that need attention?
No, but I live on the coast, so I have to be really careful with them.
So I would keep them in a bag, and then if you can, keep them in a drawer with some camphor blocks.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
that'll help a lot. That'll help. Okay. Anything else before I go to the little cam demo thing?
Deb, the stamp you used to make the design on the back of those pieces, were those one of the ones that you showed there? Or was that one of the ones from the Harbor Freight chisels?
It could be one of the ones I showed. I'm not positive. I did that a long time ago. It was a class sample, but it could well be. It could have been.
So it's possible to make one yourself that ends up with that fine of a line.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Deb,
Uh-huh.
what size bezels do you typically use? What gauge?
I won't use anything thinner than 26 gauge. 26 is the minimum I will use. I took the 28 and the 30 gauge that I had and relegated it either to the scrap pile or to weaving or to something else. I won't set a bezel with that. And the reason I won't use those for bezels is because they are absolutely unforgiving. If you make a mistake in 28 gauge, if you rumple that, you can't do what I just did on that video. You can't clean that up.
That's why I was asking, because
yeah,
it's so thin.
I do bezels. I like 24. And sometimes I'll do 22, sometimes I'll do 20, sometimes I'll do 18. It depends on the piece. I don't think I've ever done one thicker than 18, but I will not go thinner than 26 at all, ever anymore.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say weaving?
Yeah.
Wow, that might be a class someday.
Jeannie Pratt will teach you. I won't teach you weaving. Anybody else questions? All right, I'm going to go to the other little camera.
Okay, wait, I have a question. I'm sorry. Okay,
that's okay.
If you have touched your file to steel, do you have to relegate that to only steel now?
No, not at all.
Really?
But what you do have to be really careful about, though, Monica, is if you save your filings. Because if you save your filings, if I file on steel and then I file on silver and I save my filings, I'm going to have steel filings in there, right? so I want to be really careful that I don't, that I clean my file really well or something like that. I typically find I need different files for steel than I need for silver. You know, the files that I use for silver are typically much finer. And the files I use for steel are much coarser. Even the needle files, I use a number 2 cut needle files on steel, but I won't use that on silver. I use 4s and 6s. So and probably the only reason I keep them different is because I store them in different places in the studio. It's not so much a cleanliness thing. I'm just careful. And if you're going to send your silver in to have it re-refined, if you're not going to melt it down, you don't even have to care as much because they'll take care of it for you, even if you get steel scrap in there. But if you're going to remelt it, you do need to be very careful about what's in there because you don't want steel in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Deb, when you talked about the camphor block, do you mean like that camphor spirits that you put in the cotton and then put in the little cartridge?
You can do it that way, or you can buy little blocks of it that you put. I have little blocks that I put into a little containers that has holes in it. But the same thing. It's the same thing.
Where do you buy the blocks, Deb?
I get them on Amazon. And so George was saying that there's anti-corrosion bags and paper. You can also buy paper that that has, it's called anti-corrosion stuff. I know McMaster Carr carries it. I'm sure Amazon has it too. And you can get anti-corrosion bags and that kind of thing that you can store things in. The paper, you could line a drawer with the paper. You could, and that might be good for you, Denise, to line your drawers with that. So, and that's supposed to help. Anything else?
And how long does the paper last?
Available.
You have to, I don't know.
Okay.
Is all of the anti-corrosion stuff, the paper and the bags at McMaster Carr?
Yeah, George put on the chat, he just put up a link for some of that. I know that they carry it. There may be other places that carry it. Well, I'm sure there are other places that carry it. I don't know them. I have gotten the stuff I've gotten from McMaster Carr. Anything else? I knew files were, everybody has questions about files. I don't know why. All right. Check this out. So, a couple things to talk to you about real quick. One is I ordered some more of these. These are those sticks that I told you about last week, the sanding, they're called sanding twigs. And I ordered the fine ones. Last time I had coarse ones and I wanted the fine ones. And I was really surprised. There's 5 packages that come in the order. 5 of them are nothing but these pink ones. These, which is perfect. That's the finest ones. 1 package had pink ones and black ones. So if you guys order the fine ones, I was really pleased because it's all those pink ones and those are the ones that are just the best for us. This is a file that needs some cleaning. Okay, and so what I'm going to do with this is, Ashley, you asked about this. This is just a yellow brass strip that I cut. It's just a little bit of a wide strip. And what I do is rub it through here. And it takes a couple times for it to cut the teeth there, the same as the teeth in the file. And then what I can do is come in here and I go in the direction of the teeth. See how I'm shoving this stuff out? There. See how much cleaner that is than it was? And here at the end, there, see all these are still in there? I can just take this, and especially now that it's been cut to fit the teeth of the file. And it just shoves it right out of there, and it's all clean. So that is the most gentle way, the easiest way to clean your file, and it keeps them in relatively good shape. So get that off there. Next, I want to talk to you real quick about Riffler files. I didn't talk much about them. I didn't use them in this one. Riffler files tend to be pricey. They're really nice. There's a few of them that I recommended in there. These have just tiny, tiny teeth right here. And then these right here on the edge, this is the flat one. There's a few of them that I recommended, a few Riffler files, and they're on that sheet that I talked to you about and that I'll put up on Facebook. They are for getting into tiny, tiny areas. Think about if you have a T-joint that you're trying to clean up, and you're trying to clean up the solder in there, inside there. It is really hard to get in there and clean something up, and these will allow you to do that. They aren't files that you use a lot or that you'll use often. They are files that when you need them, there's very little else that will do that. So they're very specialty files. All right, and I believe.
Deb, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
On the piece you were cleaning up in the video, you went to the blue Advantage wheel around the tip of it to polish it. If it had had a blob of solder or something like where that stem was soldered on, what tool would you have used?
I would have used the Barrett file to get in there, and because the thing is, on those settings, look at this. It's right there. So on this, right in here, I can't get there easily with anything else, right? Let me grab a Barrett file. So my goal on this would be to keep this surface as flat as possible, because on this bezel, that's a square stone and it's flat, 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 right? So I want to keep that flat, flat, flat. So if I had solder up here, I would take this Barrett file and I would come in here as close to the stem as I could. What I would not do is to go back and forth like this, because if I do that, I'm going to dig a gouge right there, right? What I have to do is I'm going to come in like this and I'm going to swing around every time with every stroke like this. See how I'm doing that? To swing around. And the reason I do that is because I don't want a repeated gouge either on this side or on the front when I'm going just back and forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? No? Then you all know how to file. It's great. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is different between a Barrett file and another needle file?
Well, needle files come in a bazillion shapes. Actually, Contente. I really like Contente's files. They're the ones that I recommend. I like them much better than Rio's files. I have not been happy with Rio's files forever. So on Contente, if you go to their website and you ask about files, they have an entire page that's nothing but the files and the shapes and the everything else. So that they will explain to you what it is. But let me tell you what a Barrett file is. This one is from Stuller, and it has teeth on this side. This is the flat side. If I turn this, it's a little bit of a triangular shaped file. So the back has kind of a triangular shape to it. The back has no teeth at all, here and here. Okay, no teeth. Only this side, only the front side has teeth. Now, when I get these files, the first thing that I do with them is that I take them and on the edge, the very edge right here, sometimes when they cut the teeth, it slops over a little bit. So what I do with this is I polish these edges. And that is so that when I come in and I'm cleaning up a stone setting, say I need to clean up the very top of this bezel, I can take this with a polished edge and I can go right next to my stone, right there. I can put that file up next to my stone and it's not going to hurt it because I've polished it. It has no teeth. It won't hurt it even with the teeth unless it's a soft stone, but it's just an extra safety thing. So the Barrett file is the one that's got a little bit of a triangular back to it. It's got a flat surface, no teeth on this side and teeth only on this side. And there's just, needle files come in, I don't know, 30 different shapes at least.
I have Barrett files. I just never knew what they were called.
Yeah, so Contente has a whole page on that. And I'll put a link to that also in the Facebook group so that you can see that page. It's really interesting. because there's all kinds of ones. There's equaling files and pillar files, and there's all kinds of different ones that they call different names. So
How do you
can look at
spell, excuse me, how do you spell contente?
Contenti.
Okay, thank
Your
you.
words are the only words I can spell.
And how do you polish the edge?
Oh, so I use the white, well, it depends on how bad it is. Stellar, the files, these are Grobet files, they're good files. So they're pretty good to start with. So I don't need to usually use a grinding wheel. If I do, I'll use a stone wheel first. But on these, I usually don't. I usually start immediately with the white Advantage wheel. And then if need be, I'll go to the black one, but usually not, usually just the white Advantage wheel. And I just want it, so what I'm looking for, what I'm feeling for, is I want to be able to rub my fingernail down the side of it like this and not feel any teeth at all on the side, on that edge, okay? And if I can do that, oh, I feel a little bit right there. But if I can do that, then it's in really good shape and then it won't hurt anything. It's polished edge, okay? Anything else? No? Okay.
Deb, I have a question about the anti-tarnish bags and paper.
Okay.
I know that for camphor, we want to make sure that the metal doesn't touch it. Is that the same with the anti-tarnish products too?
No. No, you can take your file. You know, sometimes files come wrapped up in paper. Have you ever seen that where they're wrapped up in, if you get, well, most of you don't order needle files by the dozen. If you order them by the dozen, then they often come wrapped up in this tarnish-proof paper. And so that they just take it and they wrap it over and over and then roll them up. And so the paper can touch the file, you know, so you could line your drawers with it and then lay your files right on it. It'd be fine.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. And sometimes, yeah, just an oily cloth will do too. The thing I don't like about oil for a lot of what we do is that the teeth are so fine in what we do and it makes them clog easier. And I hate spending time cleaning files. That's just the pits. So it's nice if we don't have to clean them out that often.
Here's a filing question. You showed the checkering files, and was it last week or the week before you showed a beautiful gold choker that had been Florentined? So how the heck do you get beautiful straight Florentines on a curved surface like that?
Oh, curved is much easier than flat. It really is. Because you just take the file, this is not a checkering file, but you just take the file and you roll it around like this as you're working. And you work, usually it's at a diagonal. And the finer ones are much easier to do than the coarser ones. The double zero is hard. Zero is not bad. And a 1 and a 2 are very easy. But the curved surface, like a low dome or even a rounded surface. And the nice thing about a checkering file, now for this, the coarser ones are better, is that it's really easy to locate where you are in the pattern. So if you make a file mark and then you register over a little bit, but you don't go all the way over, you just go over a little bit and still catch the last teeth. If you can stay in that groove, you can make them all line up all the way down. It doesn't even take much practice. It's not that hard to do.
Oh, and it's not too hard to get the grooves parallel then?
Not at all. And especially on a low dome surface, it's really pretty easy. So, but one of the things I like, let me see if I can show you this. I don't know if you can see. Can you see on this one? I went every direction. And I like that look. I think that that's a really interesting, really fun. And you can do that on a flat surface too. Checkering files do beautiful textures. They're really beautiful. They're expensive files. They're not, you know, it's not a cheap way to go. But for a long time, I made ice tongs. And for the ice tongs, the nickel silver ice tongs I made, for the little grabber parts, I used a checkering file to file all around to make them be better grabbers. And they work really well for that. And I could line it up on a curved surface and it was not a problem. And it worked really well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Deb,
Yeah.
to keep a crisp line when you're texturing with a checkering file, do you not anneal the piece?
I never really thought about it. Because by the time I'm doing the texturing on something, I'm usually, I mean, I probably soldered on it already, so it probably is annealed.
Okay.
I don't know that it really matters. I think if it's annealed, it might clog up the file a little faster, but I'm not.
That's what I was wondering. That's what I was wondering. If you wanted to keep it real crisp, you wouldn't anneal it, but I didn't know.
I don't think it matters. I don't think.
Okay.
Because I think often it's done late enough in the process that you've soldered on it and it's not an option. It is annealed.
Right. Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today for the online version of Studio Time with Deb, and I will see you next week.